From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the last Spurs Insider before the 2024 NBA draft. We've been talking about it for what feels like years, if not decades. That cannot be possible, but it sure seems true. Jeff McDonald, Spurs beat writer for the Express News, is excited about this. Tom Orsborn, the other Spurs beat writer for the Express News, is just as excited. I'm Mike Finger. We're going to jump right in with all the updates since the last time we've spoken. Jeff, you now know for sure what the Spurs are going to do. Without further ado, without further delay, what are the Spurs going to do this Wednesday night in Brooklyn, the borough of New York City, in New York State, in the United States of America this week? Jeff, what are they going to do?
They're going to make a couple of first-round picks.
Maybe. Do you know that for sure?
Maybe, unless they trade one of them.
Well, that sounds great.
You heard it here first. I'll be honest. I'm looking forward to the day because, as you mentioned, we've been talking about what might happen for it feels like months with this draft. I'll be looking forward to the day when we reconvene, the next time we reconvene, and we can talk about what actually did happen. That will be fun.
I think it will. We'll have a lot of analysis coming up next week, the weeks beyond. But Tom, are you ready for this to get going? The Spurs, it seems like we've made light of it, but there are infinite options for the local Cagers this week. They could trade up, they could trade down, they could make their picks, they could make one of their picks. They could make no picks if they trade for a superstar. Is that what it feels like to you, Tom? Just infinite options.
It's just bouncing around. I mean, there's so much out there, so much speculation, so many scenarios. It's endless, I tell you.
Well, let me, because the listeners are tired of hearing us bounce around and dance around the specific possibilities that the Spurs could handle this week. Let me put the panel to the test, and Jeff, please play along. I know you're a curmudgeon.
I like how you're begging me already. This is going to be great.
Just please try to be professional. I'm gonna start this off, and I'm gonna start with Tom because Tom will be a professional, and he'll get us off on the right foot. One player at 4 or 8 or other picks. This could be number 1 overall. This could be trade down to number 20 overall. One player who, if you had to place a bet that the Spurs will draft, I'm talking about a potential picture, not a trade acquisition, a potential draft pick for the Spurs. One pick at either 4 or 8 or other. Who you got, Tom?
I'm going with another Frenchman if he's there, Richachet.
Really?
Yeah. If that's the scenario, if he's there, if he's on the board. Otherwise, Castle.
But since you are this is a great transition, Tom. You're professionally doing your job here. It perfectly leads into a discussion I wanted to have on a podcast this week. Mm-hmm. Zachary Richachet has worked out for the Spurs. He's been to San Antonio, I believe. He's not looked at as the kind of guy who is likely to be there at 4.
Right.
Do you think the Spurs? And again, we're just everybody play along here. We're nobody aggregate this. Nobody say that Tom Orsborn has a breaking scoop, unless maybe he does. He can let us know. Could you see a possibility of the Spurs liking him so much, and the possibilities that another Frenchman could add to the Spurs that they would trade up in the draft to get him?
I don't know if they'd go that far. I mean, they've got the assets certainly, and that's certainly got to be one of the options they're looking at. But I'm not saying I would want him. I'm not saying I wouldn't want him either. But I think Castle would be the better fit for this team. If you're going by need. And but yeah, I mean, Richachet, they did bring him in. Apparently, he might have gotten hurt while he was here, though.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah.
Which could be like to be really Machiavellian about this, that could end up working in the Spurs' favor if they got a bet, if they got the last healthy look at him before he turned his ankle. Could that be an advantage? We'll see. Now's the part of the podcast where somebody rains on the parade, mocks everybody's enthusiasm.
Mocks
I guess we have mocks all the mocks. I guess we have to do it. Jeff McDonald, please play along. If you had to pick one player for your Spurs to select in this Wednesday's draft, who you got?
Tom's already like planted the flag on Risache then.
You can play if that's your pick. That's your pick.
Well, that's not. I was just wondering how the game goes.
Colored flag.
No, everyone's available.
Everyone's available.
We can pick the same guys twice.
Man, I'm still probably gonna go because I think
by the way,
Zachary will be off the table by
you also could just to be clear on the rules.
Also, I could pick
you could pick a number 8 pick.
Yeah, but I think I'm gonna go with Stefan Castle.
We're building a consensus here.
I think that's the guy fits a need a little bit better, even though he might not be a true like lead guard right off the bat. I think he's a guy you can build into that maybe, and a lot of other good stuff to like about him. People love his dogged defensiveness, and the thought of him and Wemby guarding pick and rolls is probably alluring to Brian Wright and company. It doesn't mean everything, but to be on a national championship team, to be a big part of that national championship team, to be unflappable in a national championship run, that's all good stuff. That's all stuff in Castle's favor. So he might be the guy I would guess that ends up with the Spurs come Wednesday.
That's a great answer though, Jeff. Like I'm sort of there's no mockery here.
I feel like you're tempting me. You're just tempting me.
No, good job.
You're almost making me feel bad that I didn't live up to my reputation. And
no, you're gonna
cause me to do something horrible. So just
this
be
is
careful.
A sign of personal growth. I'm impressed.
Well, now you can continue to insult me.
I would never insult you with you being aware of it. The issue here is as longtime listeners of the podcast, the Spurs Insider know is I've sort of been tooting the Stefan Castle horn for the months and months and years that we've been talking about the 2024 draft. So it just doesn't seem fun of me to also mention him after Tom has made him his second pick. Jeff has made him his number 1 pick for this. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and look more at the number 8 pick and go the point guard route. And let's say for some reason, either your Spurs move up to grab Zachary Risache, move down, go take a crazy, unpredictable stab at Donovan Clingan to create another Twin Tower situation, which I don't think is going to happen, by the way, but there are rumblings out there that they're at least talking to the guy.
Rumbling.
Let's say that so let me look at number 8 and say some options there could be the great Devin Carter, who we discussed often on this podcast, star of the combine, possible Derek White clone, established college player from Providence, defensive stalwart. That like Devin Carter intrigues me. If you trade down a little bit, Rob Dillingham of Kentucky, another guy who could fill that shooting point guard situation. And again, both of those, you possibly could dangle your 8 pick to somebody who wants it below you and grab a Devin Carter or Rob Dillingham at 10 or 11 or 12. I think there's a lot of possibilities that the Spurs could move down in a draft in which there's no consensus about who number 1 is, about who the top 3 are, about who number 8 is. Like if somebody really wants whoever it might be at number 8 and the Spurs don't, like I think that's a possibility to move down. I could see them moving up from 4 and down from 8. I realize I'm violating the rules of my own game here by not being specific, but just trying to paint a picture of all the ways this draft can go. Any thoughts on Carter or Dillingham from you guys?
I think if the Spurs have not picked up a point guard, at the 4 spot, I think Carter is a guy to really keep an eye on, and Dillingham too.
I think it would be Carter over Dillingham. I
think you're probably right.
Yeah.
I've just weirdly fallen in love with Devin Carter in the last month or so.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I can't articulate it, but
son of an NBA player.
That's what I hear.
Which also bodes well. I think Tom Haberstroh had something not too long ago about analyzing the traits that lead to draft success. Like, surprisingly, nepotism works out in the NBA sometimes. If your dad played in the NBA, and there's like statistical method to this madness. I think what Tom did was he broke down the expected value of a bunch of picks going back decades from various universities, like various college programs. Like the Syracuse picks tend to drastically underperform their value. Surprisingly, like the University of Texas was one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of overperforming. And some of this can be skewed by the fact that like Kevin Durant came from Texas, stuff like that. But the most telling indicator was if your dad played in the NBA, you tend to outplay your expected value of your pick, which maybe like Steph Curry skews those numbers. But you see a lot of guys who are kids of players that play well.
I've always blamed my father for my lack of an NBA career.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now you have the statistical data to back that up. But yeah, so those are some of the options that the Spurs still have at 4 and 8. We've discussed this a lot in recent weeks. I still think of guys we haven't mentioned. Tidjane Salaam, and I'm butchering that name. Another Frenchman who could be there at a trade down situation. Dalton Connect of Tennessee, who we've discussed before. Would not be a shock to see him picked at 8 to pick up some shooting. We
don't mention Alex Sarr at all. Is that because we don't think he's going to be there? We don't think the Spurs really are all that interested.
This is not original reporting, but from everything I've heard is like he's at Washington. If Washington at 2, if he's available there, like I gather that's his floor, and I don't think the Spurs. So that would mean that the Spurs would need to trade up to get him, and I've not heard anything along the lines of the Spurs being interested in doing that. I think if the Spurs trade up, it would be for Risa Shea.
In general, like
Reed, we haven't discussed Reed Shepherd, by the way. But
because also aren't we pretty convinced he's going to go to Houston at 3?
I think it's one of those situations where Houston will take him at 3 if Houston makes that pick. But I think from the moment Houston landed the 3rd overall pick, people have talked about that possibly being like Houston's in a situation where they might consider trading it. So, like I think Reed Shepherd is a guy, notwithstanding the first reference that we had to him on this podcast
when you slandered him
3 years ago when I slammed him for his horrendous NCAA tournament performance, sort of tongue in cheek, sort of whatever.
Boy,
that
was ages ago. No, but Reed Shepherd seems like his floor is like
history here.
Well, the point I was trying to make back then, and we've discussed this before, is every player in the draft, especially in this draft, has reasons not to take him, and that would be like a reason not to take him, like the last look that you say. It might be a dumb reason not to take him, but he came up short in a big moment. I'm not even convinced of this argument myself. Like, it's very dumb. But the point is there's downsides to everybody. There's downsides to Risa Shea. There's downsides to Alex Sarr. But from everything that I've seen, like if you want Reed Shepherd, who might be great, you might have to trade up for a number 4 to get him, because a team, either Houston takes him at 3 or somebody trades up to get him at 3 before the Spurs get that chance. When I mentioned Reed, I was interrupting Jeff, I think, and I'm sure he's lost his train of thought. But what do you remember?
Well, can you? I guess what I was going to ask is, it sounds like like what level of importance do you put on this draft in relation to the entire Wembanyama rebuilding process? Like it's the biggest draft in Spurs history. Now they've got to build it. They've got 2 top 10 picks. Like what is the baseline? Just speaking in generalities, not specific players, what is the baseline of what the Spurs need to get out of this draft to consider it successful? Like, obviously, you'd like to get 2 future All-Stars. That would be great. That would be awesome. 2 future Hall of Famers at 4 and 8. That would really jumpstart the Wemby project. But that's probably not realistic. Like, what's the baseline for when we look back 5 years from now? We can say, yeah, they did a good job.
I think I'm going to slightly dodge, but I think this draft is part of the offseason, and I think when you talk about this draft, you have to talk about all the different permutations that come along with any trades related to it. And what I would say is this week, the last week of June 2024. The Spurs need to acquire a starter, a productive starter on their next competitive playoff team, like a guy who will be around when they win. And I'm not going to say 2, because maybe you package picks together and acquire one in a trade, or you package picks together and move up and trade one guy who you're sure is going to be around, or you make both picks and the second guy, you don't need both picks to work out. You need one of them to work out. The second guy might become a nice role player who, and we mentioned this before, at the number 8 pick, like if you end up with a productive role player, long-term role player, that's a success at number 8. So to answer your question as specifically as I can, I think this week the Spurs need to acquire a solid starter that will team with Victor Wembanyama when they're winning again, and hopefully that's in the next 3 years. You know, with by winning I mean a solid playoff team that's not just in the play-in, but you know, actually competing for stuff. Does that sound fair?
Definitely. And Reece Shea would fit that bill, I think. I'm not so sure about Castle, though. I like him a lot, and yeah, if they could get a starting point guard out of this, that would be great. But I'm not sure that he's, fits everything you just described, Mike. But Reece Shea, in my mind, does.
What did I satisfy what you're looking for with your question there, Jeff?
Yes, I award you 100 Gryffindor points.
I don't know what that is. I don't have kids, but it sounds cool.
I think you definitely can't draft 2 guys that flame out, right? Like somebody's got to be around from this draft years from now, and that might be an argument for using that 8th pick or the second of the 2 picks if you make 2 picks on like a Devin Carter type that just seems to have a floor where they're not going to just completely bust out. You can see a path where even if they are what that guy is what he is, will still help a productive team. So that might be an argument for taking someone that you don't have to develop as much, but maybe doesn't have the high like all-star ceiling, but that guy's going to be solid for a long time.
I'm gonna repeat a maybe terrible comparison. Again, I'm not sure if this is even close to fitting, but if Dalton Connect becomes Jetty Osman, like, is that okay at 8? To have the next Jetty Osman, just a player you can bring off your bench that's going to give you productive minutes, that can play like a wing, possibly some 4, and can make 3-pointers, but do nothing spectacularly. If that's who Dalton Connect becomes, is that okay?
I think that's okay. I also think if you want the next Chetty Osman, you could probably just re-sign the current Chetty Osman.
Well, no, you'd get a 20-year-old who's
20-year-old Chetty Osman.
I think we can agree that Chetty Osman has passed his peak. Anyway,
he's like 29.
Well, I don't know. And the draft pick is cheaper than Chetty probably would be, or maybe not.
That's true.
Maybe he wouldn't be. I don't know what the market is.
No, you're correct. You're probably correct.
Anyway, yeah, I think it's reasonable.
I look at it like what's a rotation? Like 8 players. You need 8 players to make a solid NBA rotation.
9.
And the Spurs have their 1. They probably have their 3. You could probably argue there's a 4 or 5 in there. It's about filling out those other spots. Like maybe you don't get your 2 in the draft. Maybe you do. That would be awesome. If one of the guys you draft on Wednesday ends up becoming a viable number 2 to Victor Wembanyama, I mean, that would be great. I don't know that you can go into the draft banking on that, but if you could get, your 6th, your number 6 guy, or your number 3 guy, or well, we already said that number 3, but your number 4 guy, someone like that, I think that shows signs of progress. That moves the ball forward, and I think that's what you're looking to do with this draft and this offseason. So I think that's kind of the one way to look at it.
I think that's probably a pretty smart way to describe it. And rather than what I said about productive starter on the next winning team, if you would rank the Spurs players or rank like you just did, we're not talking about the 1 position or 3 position, point guard and small forward. We're talking about Victor Wembanyama is your best guy. He's number 1. And when you said they already have their 3, that I'm gonna make an assumption that you're talking about Devin Vassell.
That's Sandro Mamushvili, yes.
Yes. Devin Vassell's probably when you're thinking about what the Spurs are going to become when they start competing again, like you like to slot in Devin Vassell as your 3rd best guy, maybe. I think if you can, in this draft, get a guy who could displace Devin Vassell as the 3rd best guy, or get your 4th best guy. If you can get your 4th best guy on your 2026 team in this draft, I think that's productive. And then maybe you go get number 2 in a trade somewhere. I guess that's where you'd have to get him in next year's draft, whatever. But then things start looking pretty salty for the Spurs. If Victor Wembanyama filling that top dog role, somebody in the trade filling the sidekick role, Devin Vassell, very productive 3rd option, somebody in this draft or acquired this week becomes the 4th option. You still have your Jeremy Sohan. You still have maybe Keldon Johnson, which leads into something that I want to talk about in a little bit. Who am I missing that's part of the future? Trey Jones is a solid, 7th or 8th guy, backup point guard type. You're starting to cook with gas there.
Yeah. People still cook with gas?
I do. I know there's been studies that gas stoves can lead to some issues, which may describe some things about me. But I like cooking with. Tom, you like cooking with gas? You probably have an electric stove.
Yeah, I'm man, gas all the way.
There you go.
Me and gas all the way.
Yeah.
Which leads us into Keldon Johnson. Name me a better gas station.
You grew up with gas, Tom, in your house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather be cooking with nuclear fission.
I used to have to haul in the logs too, when we went that route.
Oh, wow.
Did you have to chop the wood?
I never done. What was that, a furnace?
Yeah, the old stovepipe system. Yeah.
Wow. Tom is a connection. This is a reminder to the kids out there listening to the podcast. Ask your elders, like Tom Orsborn. Ask your elders for stories about their youth, because we're going to lose them. Tom's getting up there, and we need to take advantage of every moment we have with the elders, because they're a living connection to America of yesteryear. And Tom Orsborn here, who lived through those days, like the 70s, the early 70s, long ago. Like he's providing us a glimpse of what it was like.
Yeah.
And you would actually haul logs into your home for what, heat or for cooking? What was going on there, Tom?
When the train rumbled through my mother's hometown of Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, train was almost right next to the house. of the coal, the cars that would carry coal, some of the coal would bounce off, and the townspeople in Beaver Falls, many of them immigrants, would collect the coal, bring it inside, and use it.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, people forget. People forget what it was like not so long ago.
People forget. Well, the
If you want to know
Northeast
how to
is.
make America great again, you need to ask Tom Orsborn.
I don't know about that. I don't think we should venture there. But the Northeast, they still have places that where like oil is a heating thing, right? Like
Yes.
we never see that in Texas,
Yes.
but they use oil for heating their homes up there, which is fascinating.
Whole different world.
Whole different world.
And somehow their system seems to work better than ours.
That's true.
In times of extreme cold and heat.
Yeah. We have our own grid, which
All right.
creates its own issues. Somebody who's sort of been off that grid for the past few months is our good friend, a guy who enjoys bucolic ranch farming life outside of San Antonio and his estate, which we will not disclose. It's also a highly secure, undisclosed location. Keldon Johnson, who, because through no fault of his own, is at the center of probably every Spurs trade rumor that you've seen this offseason. And this leads me to my next question, which I will ask you, the panel, to participate in seriously. And I'll start with Tom again. Will Keldon Johnson be in uniform for your San Antonio Spurs at their season opener this October? Yes or no?
Boy, yeah. I mean, if they're going to make a trade, he's going to be involved. I mean, there's no question about it. But I don't think they're going to make a trade. So I've got Keldon coming back.
Keldon coming back. Thank you for that earnest, thoughtful answer, Tom. And now we'll move to Jeff.
My answer is sort of the same. I always answer these sort of conservatively. Just in general, if you're asking me, is there going to be a trade or not a trade? I always tend to lead towards not a trade. Just that seems to be probability wise the highest probability thing in any situation. Is
well, with
hard
Spurs
to make a trade.
With Spurs, it is.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to make a trade. Like, you don't just get to trade because you want to, or like, hey, we want to trade Keldon Johnson, which is not the case, by the way. But fans sometimes seem to think that you just decide to trade a guy and then he gets traded, and that doesn't always work that way. Like, someone has to want him, and the deal has to make sense, and for both sides, and the money has to line up in a lot of cases. So there's it's like a Rubik's cube to put any NBA trade together. So I don't think a trade is necessarily likely, and so if the trade isn't necessarily likely, I think Keldon will be on the roster to start the season. Now, he may be a guy that, just because he's on the roster to start the season doesn't mean he finishes the season. Like, there's a whole trade deadline situation in February that probably Keldon's name will pop up again at, if he's still on the roster. But if you're asking me when training camp starts, will we hear Keldon Johnson screaming throughout the Victory Capital Performance Center in gleeful joy daily, then I think the answer is yes.
I think that's fair. We're going to close
take
this.
The contrary. You want to be the contrarian here?
Well, no. I think I agree with this. Doesn't make for great riveting podcast content, but I think both of you summed it up there. I think if we had to put a percentage on it, I might go as high as like 45% that Keldon isn't here.
You're basically calling it a near coin flip.
I'm calling it a near coin flip. I'll close with this. You know, we don't need to keep repeating the same stuff every week over and over again. But like, and I'm giving no endorsement or corroboration or confirmation of this proposal at all. Like I'm not saying at all that Brian Wright or R.C. Buford or Greg Popovich have even considered it at all. But just as a fun closing question here, would the sort of ridiculously convoluted, like 3, 4, 5-way trade in which you trade a pick and Keldon Johnson and come back with a lower pick, maybe multiple lower picks, and Marcus Smart. Would that move the needle for you at all? Do you think that would be a good Spurs trade? I will start here just in saying that I think it's understandable why the Spurs might want a Marcus Smart type player in their organization next year, meaning a veteran guy who's won some games, can impart some lessons to the youngsters, still be a productive defender, two-way player, smart guy. I'm not necessarily sure that Marcus Smart is the Marcus Smart type player that they want. They there's other players like that who might fit the bill. So I will answer my own question first and say that's not necessarily preposterous. That's along the lines of deals that the Spurs could make this offseason. But I'm not sure I'm in favor of that one specifically.
Yeah,
I'll go to Jeff.
Like we said off the air yesterday, like you were saying, they could probably use a Marcus Smart type player, just not Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
And the reason is I don't know how to say this without it sounding mean. I'm not sure you want to introduce that level of psychosis into the Wembanyama project. You don't want to bring in the crazy people just yet.
People like him. The teammates like him. He's an intense. Maybe the word you're looking for is intensity. Let's put it that way rather than psychosis. That seems a bit
because I am not
libelous.
a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not diagnosing anybody.
Yeah. Tom, does that move the needle for you at all? Trading down in the draft, lower picks, and Keldon Johnson picking up Marcus Smart.
Yeah, if you can get a veteran who can contribute. We've talked about that. A leader who's more of a contributor than the veterans they've had the last 2 years. And no knock against Doug McDermott, no knock against Devontae Graham.
Right.
But yeah, they need to upgrade that veteran leader type, have more of a voice in the locker room, on the floor, and you can back it up with his play.
Credibility.
Yeah, I think Marcus Smart, yeah, I wouldn't mind having that little psychosis, a little edge.
Yeah,
I think they've lacked that. Pops said that several times. They could use that nasty again.
I think you guys both did a great job. I think we're hitting our midsummer peak here. Like I'm impressed.
Man, we're not going to hit home runs in the middle of the summer.
Tom got
nice solid double.
Tom got on the Zoom immediately this week to record this, like just a technical master, just all over it, like no glitches at all. Jeff took every question seriously, gave thoughtful answers, very little blowback in terms of like rudeness or sarcasm or stuff like that. Like, I don't know who we are anymore. Maybe we're ready for a new era, just like your local Cagers are. We'll see. I'll be in Brooklyn this week. Tom and Jeff will be at the Victory Capital Center talking to all the executives. We're gonna have full coverage of the draft on expressnews.com. Before we talk to you again, it will be July, and there could be some free agent moves going on. We'll have a lot to talk about when we see you next time. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.